I discovered that I had advanced breast cancer. I had a new baby coming out of the NICU. My father was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. And that book came out of those experiences. And it was the catharsis of writing about it, but it was also really meant as a guidebook for others. I used the experiences as they were occurring. I had to write that book and I had the subject matter, whether I wanted to or not. Once I survived that experience, it was always my dream, really, to write about the patient's experiences, the ones that totally influenced my career, the ones that stuck with me. There's just those patients that I've retold their stories to my trainees thousands of times because the lessons learned were so important. And or how I changed what I did, how I learned from what I did, how I want them to think about what can and cannot be.
Welcome to the Persistence U podcast with Lizbeth. That's you as in university, but we're really much more of a community here. Lizbeth Meredith is an author, speaker, and online teacher. Each week, she'll be delivering amazing stories from survivors and strivers, all threaded together with a dose of persistence. We're so glad you're listening.
For sisters and brothers, I am thrilled to introduce you to the author of Breathless. Breathless is a book that I got to endorse. That's one of the fun things you can do as an author is you get invitations to endorse someone else's work. I so enjoyed this book. The author is Tali Lando, Dr. Tali Lando, and here's what I wrote in the endorsement. Breathless is a compelling memoir that pulls back the curtain on physician life, welcoming readers into the realities of what many doctors face, navigating the compelling demands of a high-stakes medical career, marriage, parenthood, and more. The thing is, Dr. Lando not only was juggling a whole bunch of things, but when she received the diagnosis of breast cancer, the doctor became the patient. And so she has such an interesting and fresh perspective, and she allowed that experience to transform the way that she continues to practice as a doctor. So I know you are going to love her. I just knew the moment I spoke with her first that this is someone I could imagine having coffee with and talking and talking and talking with. Dr. Tali Lando, thank you so much for being here today. I'm excited that we finally get to meet face to face. And it has been a joy connecting with you through. Thanks for being on Persistence U.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited about Breathless, your new book coming out. It is not your first book, but this was a big work from your heart. So can you tell us a little bit, tell Persistence U listeners a little bit about your watershed moment and what was it? When did you know that you needed to write this book, and give us some backstory?
So I wrote my first book, Hell and Back, as a reaction to what was happening in my life. This moment in my life where all these events were happening concurrently. I discovered that I had advanced breast cancer. I had a new baby coming out of the NICU. My father was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. And that book came out of those experiences. And it was the catharsis of writing about it, but it was also really meant as a guidebook for others. I used the experiences as they were occurring. I had to write that book and I had the subject matter, whether I wanted to or not. Once I survived that experience, it was always my dream, really, to write about the patient's experiences, the ones that totally influenced my career, the ones that stuck with me. There's just those patients that I've retold their stories to my trainees thousands of times because the lessons learned were so important. And or how I changed what I did, how I learned from what I did, how I want them to think about what can and cannot be the downstream effects of certain, when you first see a patient, the other things you have to think of. But basically, I had to get my bearings. I had to live. I didn't want to, hope for too long of a life, honestly, at the beginning. I just needed to survive, exist, re-enter the world. And that took a couple of years for sure. And then I started to think about this next book. I didn't have a name for it. It was just a concept, but it was like my life's work. But I had to amass a life's work, and I was still relatively young in my career. And as the years went on, I really struggled with de-identifying my patients enough that they were unrecognizable. There would be no HIPAA violation. There would be no issue from any patient that, this was a part of my story I didn't maybe want to share, but still keeping the kernel of what made the story so important. And I really had a hard time with that. Like, I know doctors do it. I'm not the first doctor to write some type of memoir. I even spoke to another pediatric neurosurgeon who had just published a book, and he did kind of a combo. There were patients, he spoke to the families directly. There were patients he just de-identified. There's no smooth path. And somehow I thought about it for years. And when I finally had that like aha moment of like, here's how I could take one particular story. There was one I really, really wanted to tell because I wanted to tell these stories that really evolved, that, like I said, they had a point, not just in the interesting nature of the patient, the facts involved, but what could you like really take away with it on a bigger scale? And that one I really struggled with the most because it was not a good outcome, right? So those are the real difficult ones.
Right.
I actually felt very comfortable with the families that I have amazing relationships with, and that the outcomes, even if they were struggles, ultimately the patient prevailed and did well. But that was not all the cases that I learned the most from. And so when I just really harnessed a way to do it, and again, it was like just a kind of a project of, I had some outside input as well. I had another surgeon, and I said, I can't figure out how to make this story more universal and less recognizable. And he helped me in a way that was like, okay, I could do this. And then I wrote that story because that was like the real one that stuck on me. And then I said, okay, I think I can figure out how to do this other one. The first probably 7 stories were ones I carried with me. They like spilled out of me,
Right.
But then, like every book that you write, you have to have an arc. You have to round it out. The ones that you're like, for example, I said, I have to write about tonsil bleeds because that is a major common complication in pediatric ENT. And yet I don't have this, great story for it. So
What is it
that
called?
one I like sat for days and like churned out of myself,
Right.
And that was, when I really felt like I was getting the meat ready to go and I had something to say, I wrote down those first stories. And then I stopped and I thought, wait a minute, does anybody care what I have to say? Right? Because
Right.
you have to ask
What
them.
kind of bleed was it? By the way, what kind of bleed was it?
Tonsil, like after you
Tonsil.
remove the tonsils.
Okay.
One of the most common, it's called complication, but when people think of complications, they think, oh, someone did something wrong.
Okay.
In surgery, a complication can be something that has a risk. It's like a known risk.
Right.
It could even be a 5% risk, meaning not teensy, tiny. It still occurs, but it is not due to like error. So, and that is also, by the way, something I really delve into in my book. Like, someone must be to blame. Something must have gone wrong. And that's an example of, no, I've done tonsillectomies for 20 years and I still have that percentage because that is just the reality
Right.
of human anatomy and chance and, certain factors. So it was just an example of one of the ones that I was like, I don't have this story ready, but I know that this is something I have to cover if I'm going to write, a book of this nature.
Right.
And that was like round 1 was the stories. But I'm like, that's not really enough. It's not enough to just, many people have told stories about medicine and, complex stories. I wanted 2 other factors. One was, what are the life lessons that came out of this case? So that's not like an automatic. It
Yeah.
had to be universal. I mean, like expandable, not just to a doctor, something you could learn about, you know, be prepared, let's just say. Like,
Right.
be prepared and know that if plan A fails, you have a plan B. Know if plan B fails, you have a plan C. Like, that might be a lesson that I want to teach my residents, that you don't have to be a resident to need to know that. It's a life lesson, right? So rating that section to each story was, again, like quite a hard thing. And then the last one, and I'll tell you how it came about because I think it's really interesting, was how it affected my home life, like the real personal impact, emotionally, my kids, my time, how, and I'm not saying I have all the answers, but it's really, apparently, first I thought, does anyone really want to know that? Like, do people care? But it seemed, when I got some feedback initially, that that is what people want to hear, to make it like real and relatable.
Right.
But when you were mentioning Kate, she is the person that got me from some stories on my computer to
Right.
like, I'm going to do this all the way. And she knows I credit her with this, because it was, what first was like the de-identifying, the kind of legal being, loyal to patients element. And the second one was someone to believe in me.
Yes.
And that's really hard these days, as you know, because
Right.
it's a tough world out there. There's very few books, relative to how many books, authors there are and things that are being written, that are really picked up by a major publishing house.
Okay.
Those days are really, probably like 15 years ago, there was this big decline. And so she basically wrote to me out of the blue. I had sent her something 6 months prior. And when she sent me that email this one day, that was like, wow, I finally read your first book. And now I want to work with you. Like, I love your writing. And now I want to hear more. It was like the first, not my mom or like,
Right.
so one of my family or my friends who were like, I'm begging them to say something positive,
Right.
and they're afraid to say anything negative. Like, an objective person that has no skin in the game and that only would want to work with me if she thought it was going to be a success, because no publisher, editor, she's like kind of a extraordinaire, she has multiple hats.
Yeah.
And it was so uplifting, that moment when I got that email, and it just gave me this whole wind. It's like the wind beneath my wings, right? And then I just
Right.
spread open again, and I was like, I am going to go for it. Like, I'm going to spend the next year. I mean, you never know how long, but like
Right.
devoting time, thousands of hours, and not feel that it was just going to end up as a Word document on my laptop for the rest of my life.
Right. That's so exciting. And just backfilling for those who are writers listening, Kate is with
Silver Tree.
Silvertree. It just hit a blank. She's
I
going to
know.
get me for this. Silvertree Publishing. I had another friend who also was with Silvertree Publishing, had her books released with them, and they have some amazing books. But to be able to work with a smaller press that kind of does everything and believes in you and helps you, that's amazing. That truly is, because there's a lot in the author world. There's a lot of scammy sort of people who say, I'll help you, I'll help market your book, or I'll help you publish or whatever. And they will happily take your money, and they have no business doing so, and take off with your money. And there you are. When you look at, like, let's look at the title Breathless. Where did that come from? Was that because of the tonsil bleeds?
No, actually. So the majority of what I do is endoscopic airway surgery, meaning
Okay.
not cuts, although I do that when necessary, but using cameras inside the mouth and operating on often the airway of little babies or children who have been in the ICU. And so that is my passion. And I'm not very unique in the world of pediatric ENTs. That is our passion. So breathing and air movement is like the story of our lives. But yet again, Breathless was one of those, you're in the shower thinking and thinking and thinking and trying to come up with the name that's just going to encapsulate what you're trying to say. And I just, it was like that epiphany of it's the play on what am I always trying to do is I'm trying to give them breath, right? And then when the emergencies, it's when they're breathless. And it kind of just played in so many nice ways that I was like, wow, I got it. You got it.
Right.
Great
Oh, that's so
title for your
exciting.
book.
That's so exciting. What surprised you the most when you're writing it with, and you had feedback and you had some edits to go through? But what was the most surprising thing that you went through this time around with your second book?
Couple things. I did this first super rough version that was cases. It wasn't all the cases I ended up writing, but like, let's say what I thought were my cases.
Right.
And then some of the life lesson section. Once I had a framework. I was like, now I know how to write into that framework. I really struggled with that the first time. So that's why it was such a big deal to me the second time. And I ended up structuring it like the operating room. It really felt right, meaning beginning of every case, you do a time out where you're supposed to be like, here's why we're here. This is what we're doing. Let's all be on the same page.
Sure.
And I was like, well, that's a cool way to do an intro to a story. Like, here's the backstory. I called it the timeout, but like, it's the backstory.
Right.
And then the actual action. And then, honestly, we don't always do this on very straightforward cases. You're supposed to do a debrief,
Sure.
which is like, what went wrong? What went right? What could we do different? Again, when you are doing routine cases, you don't do that debrief, but it was another like really kind of nice way to encapsulate the debrief is like, here's my lessons.
Mhm.
And like, here's they are kind of bullet point version of them. Okay, fine. So then I was like, I got it. I love the structure. I'm happy. I'm moving. And one of my neighbors, who's a very good friend of mine, who's like that woman in your life that like would read a rough draft that no one else would want to read. So
Right.
she reads it and she comes home. I mean, she comes over and she says, I want to know what happened to you after that story's over. Like when you went home. And I'm
Right.
like, really? I mean, it's not always like glamorous, you know?
Right.
Sometimes I cried in the shower, or sometimes I just turned the radio up, or sometimes I just fell asleep, you know?
Right.
Then I have my 14-year-old daughter read a chapter, also rough. She does not know what the other person says. And she says, you don't talk enough about yourself.
Right.
And, like really coming from different angles, like a 14-year-old eighth grader, and someone in their late 40s who, is different perspective. So then that was that last piece. Like and that was the hard one. Like, how did it wasn't like a global, how did the whole entire life of my career affect me? It was like each story I kind of committed to having I made this one I made up like an at home, like what happens at home aftermath.
Right.
And I used it as like the way to talk about like when things go wrong, when things have when patients are not happy with you, when you have a big win, like all that other stuff, when you know, disappoint your family in order to help the patient, when you disappoint the patient a little in order to be for your family, like, all those
Right.
things.
I love that you sought the feedback of different people with different perspectives and they had the same message. That's when you really know that
Yeah.
there's something to listen to. That is so exciting. So when is your book going to be published? It's coming right up, I know. It's targeted, right? October was very intentional. So can you
Yes.
tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah. First of all, you just want it out there. The editing process also, I mean, was multi-level. I edited it personally 3 full times, painstakingly went line by line. And, it's really hard to do your own editing, but I wanted it to go to Kate, my editor, like 95% of the way there because there's just a reality. If a
Right.
person gets a really polished version, they can bring it all the way home.
Right.
I mean, even if they're great, they have to keep focusing on your grammar and your missing stuff and the arc. So I worked really hard on trying to get it as good as I felt I could do it before passing it off. And I do appreciate that she said,
She validated you.
yeah, she's like, I don't usually get it in this good a shape. And there was still work to be done.
Right.
After all of that was done, I did put paragraph by paragraph into AI where I put in the paragraph and I tightened it a little bit.
Okay.
So it did help that last extra wordy element that you
Okay.
sometimes do. But I was very careful about like reading every line. And if you put the whole thing in, you're not going to be able to do that. I mean, I know people like these things evolve, but that was a way that I had like, I caught some extra, repetitions and things like that.
Sure.
And then I gave it to a very, very critical neighbor of mine who's in like 10 book clubs. And believe it or not, he caught like 50 more things.
No.
But like, you can't believe it because so many eyes are on it.
Yes.
And when he was done and he and I sat for hours with him showing me like nitpicky, but good, I was like, okay, this thing is like fully baked, it's like in good shape. And now I just want it out there. So then that is, where the date, it was the end of the summer. And I don't know, the general wisdom seems to be nobody puts their book out at the end of the summer. And then you don't want to do it right when everyone's back at school and starting the fall. So that's kind of how October came to be.
And the thing is, when a writer is getting feedback from people, it is very easy to insert a mistake while you fix a mistake.
Right.
And so it is always a good idea to put somewhere in the writing, the acknowledgments or something like that. If you find a typo that had missed me, by all means, email me at whatever, because it does happen. It just does in all books, no matter how they're published. It's rough. It's really tough to not do that. So good job of getting feedback. It also speaks to the fact that you were secure enough in your writing and yourself as a person, because some people crumble under the feedback of an editor or a proofreader. So great work, because that is still challenging and you did it. So the date will be, we're looking for Breathless to be published October the 14th or 15th or
I
thereabouts.
think 15. Amazon definitely says October 15th, so I think that's the date. But I thought we were moving it one day up, but let's say October 15th because that is a solid date.
Love it. Love, love, love it. It's going to be ebook, paperback, and will it eventually be audiobook?
I so badly want to do an audiobook. It will be an audiobook 100%. I'm grappling a little with which of the pathways to do. Like,
Right.
do you buy all the equipment yourself and do you kind of record the wave files and then send it to some person to like pretty it up? Or do you go to a sound studio? There's like all these versions and it's money, so you want to make the right
time.
choice, right?
Time that a busy doctor doesn't always have.
Right.
So
It's
that's
weird that I kind of look forward to maybe escaping for whatever that amount of time that your voice doesn't strain. I don't know that answer yet, but let's say it's 45 minutes or something like that,
Right.
and a half an hour. And I kind of get to revisit my own writing. I don't know. It's kind of fun. Not in reality. In reality, it's like you lose your voice. It goes on forever. I know.
You find a new mistake. You're like, wait a minute, I've had 30 people look at this. How did this happen?
It's so painful because my oldest brother, the
Right.
minute I published my first book and he read it,
Oh, no.
he immediately emailed me. And of course, it was like he picked up the mistakes. It was out there. It pains me to this day. And I know it's going to happen.
And it may, and that's just fine. And I've done the same thing myself, although I did ask people, I said, I'm putting this different book, but a particular book on a really tiny sale so I could get like launch people to buy it and then please help because I couldn't afford one more time edit. It was painful. It was painful. There were so many, I just had no idea. I'd hired editors. It's harder than it seems. I will just say that. For anyone who's not written a book, do it, but do know that that is a real challenge.
Wait, but I have one positive thing. So last night, I went to the wedding of my neighbor's daughter, the one that did this final edit. And he's probably 60. I met his college roommate. And it was just a random, like I was talking to like a random guest at the wedding. He tells me he's this Lewis's college roommate. And he's like, if Lewis read your book and he recorded every single mistake, your book is going to be perfect.
Fantastic.
He's a genius. And he went to Penn with him. He taught me this guy's now like a big time lawyer, the one that I was talking to. And he was talking about Lewis and Lewis's prowess. And I was like, I got a seriously good person to read this book who is going to pick up almost everything.
That is fantastic. You live in a good neighborhood.
Yeah. I got lucky.
With avid readers. I can't believe somebody would belong to that many book groups, but I love it.
I know.
Well, I am so excited to see this book in print. I've seen it, but now to see it come out to the world, what a gift. And I know the listeners will be interested in where can we connect with you and your work? Where is a central place where people can follow up and connect with you?
So there's a couple options. One is my website, which is www.drtalilando.com. So not hard to forget if you see my name on the podcast. And I do also have an active LinkedIn page, also Dr. Tali Lando. And for more fun stuff, because I have a lot of fun, like videos out there from work, from my family. I have a really active TikTok and Instagram. My Instagram is actually more substantive, I would say, because it has also a lot of clinical stuff, but still, I think, fun. And I changed everything uniform. So to make it not hard, it's at Dr. Tali Lando on Instagram. And then I just started my foray into a little more fun, playful TikTok at Surgeon Tali.
I like
these are
that.
options. These are all options.
It's fantastic. Well, I hope you have so much fun throughout the year marketing the book and just connecting with readers and storytellers also, because you've written your book and it allows other people to share their stories with you. So thank you for sharing yours with us. And I'm really excited to have you.
Thank you for all your help and your encouragement. I really appreciate it.
It was my joy.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's show. Thank you so much for listening. Now, to find out more, head on over to lameredith.com and be sure to hop on the mailing list too. If you've enjoyed this show, please leave a rating and review or share with a friend. And if you really, really liked it, go ahead and subscribe so that you never miss another episode. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Persistence U with Lizbeth.